Well, welcome to our July 2023 College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars, or Canvas meeting. I'm Brett Ackman with CAN, and as always, I'll be your host as we share more wonderful research coming out of the world of autism in higher education. And we'll be glad to have Azadeh Bolhari, our guest presenter, speak shortly about their work on self-efficacy in neurodivergent engineering students. We'll get to that in just a few moments, but we want to remind you all as we get started, if you haven't already, to please make sure you're listed in the meeting agenda. Once again, that is in the chat. Also, if you have any questions or thoughts throughout, use the chat, turn on your microphone if you'd like. We welcome that. Before we get started, we usually have a little icebreaker activity to get everybody participating in some capacity, if you can. So the prompt for July, it's the middle of the summer, and this is often the time when folks are hopefully taking some time for themselves and enjoying a good book or movie or series or podcast. So that's the question for today. What has been your favorite summer form of entertainment? So whatever that might be. So if you want to list a specific book or movie or series or whatever the case may be, and offer some recommendations to the group. You're welcome to put in the chat or share verbally. So TC's been listening to the Smartness podcast. On a more action-oriented note, Kayvon is opting for John Wick 4. Let's see, Jess has opted for Star Trek season Strange New Worlds. Here, that's good. The Bear has been Brittany's choice. Gardening, great activity. The Cambridge Handbook of Creativity. Yes, definitely more academic there, and but that still sounds really fun. Any other recommendations? Kiara is teaching their 2-year-old how to swim. Greta's opting for multiple podcasts. Loves Stuff You Should Know. Oh yeah, that's an older podcast. I remember listening to that. Kendra's been going on some Peloton rides. Lindsay's opted for some fun reads. Lots of good recommendations here. Well, feel free to keep those coming, and let's get started with our meeting. As always, with Canvas, feel free to, if you're not already on our listserv, to make sure you're signed up so you're alerted of our future meetings and recordings, as well as sharing resources. Definitely want to make sure everybody's apprised there. And if you're not already formally part of College Autism Network as a member, we always encourage you to make sure that you are a member so you can get certain benefits, such as discounts for the College Autism Summit. And make sure to renew your membership as well if you are a member. So keep tabs on that. And speaking of our College Autism Summit, which is a mere 3 months away, we're going to pass it over to our executive director, Lee Williams, to discuss what is ahead.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, it's coming up. So we just finished doing the program proposal review. We got 90 proposals, which is just kind of mind-blowing. And the quality of those proposals is just astonishing. Sadly, we have to reduce those to a schedule that will fit, but I think you will find good content for everybody. There are great research presentations. There is some great content around program design and implementation. So I'm really excited. We will have the program scheduled, or at least the list of programs, out in the next couple of weeks. But I promise you will find great stuff to attend. So I'm going to just drop the link to the summit here in the chat. Take a look, October 18th to 20th in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, on the campus of Vanderbilt University, hosted by the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation. And we hope to see all of you there.
Thank you, Lee. I know that the countdown is beginning for so many of us. And as a reminder to folks to make sure you book your reservations with hotels where we have a group rate early, as well as to book your travel arrangements. I just handled mine yesterday, so very excited for what's ahead with the summit. At this point, we turn it over to all of you. If there are resources that you want to share, whether it be articles you've read, studies that you've read or are trying to recruit for, if you've come across a cool resource that might be useful for the larger community. We also welcome if there's any celebrations or positive announcements to share, or professional changes or highlights too. This is a nice space to relay that to the wider team.
One thing I'll mention, Brett, is if you are not receiving our monthly newsletter, which comes out around the first week of the month, it could be in your spam folder, who knows? But if you don't get it, send me your email address and let me double check our mailing list to make sure that you're on it, or I will add you.
Good reminder there, absolutely. Also, I'll as we wait for maybe some folks to contribute, I'm going to drop in a link in the chat to an article that was published in Inside Higher Ed last month that focused on how the Illinois General Assembly has passed a resolution that recognizes neurodiversity in higher education and really trying to encourage more inclusivity. And our founder of CAN, Brad Cox, is mentioned and contributes to some quotes to that article as well. So you might find that be interesting. It's definitely an encouraging sign of embracing neurodiversity in higher education. So I'll definitely encourage you to check that out at your own time. Other things that folks want to contribute.
Hi, everybody. I'll just introduce myself because I'd like to give a shout out to someone that you all know very well. She's been my friend and mentor since I started at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Lori Ackles is moving on to a new venture on the West Coast and will be the executive director for the Washington Neurodiversity Project. And then as she transitions away from RIT, I will be stepping into her role with those very big shoes to fill. And so I'm here to say hello to everyone, and I look forward to getting more involved. So thank you for your expertise and to continually advance to be thought leaders in our area. So thank you.
So glad you could be joining us, Kendra. And yes, I think I see Lori's joining us by phone. So glad to have you all engaged. But we have even more announcements. Annette mentions in the chat, they've become an assistant extension professor at the University of Missouri in October last year. And our College of Agriculture dean is very encouraging of Annette pursuing their work in neurodiversity. Wonderful, major kudos. Kayvon shares an article written by a grad student fellow, Hari at Vanderbilt, which you can check out there. Lots of good things to be passing along. Anything else folks would like to share? Okay, well, if anything comes to mind, you're welcome to put in the chat. And at this point, I'll turn it over to our guest presenter for our July meeting, Dr. Azadeh Bolhari at the University of Colorado, Boulder, an associate teaching professor and associate director for undergraduate education of environmental engineering. And this presentation focuses on exploring innovation self-efficacy in neurodivergent engineering students. This seems to be an interesting topic. I don't think we've quite explored as much from a disciplinary standpoint here on this. Occasionally we'll focus on specific spaces in academia, but it's always unique when we have the chance to learn about students in a particular field. So we are looking forward to your presentation there. And throughout, we encourage you all to input your questions and comments and reflections in the chat, and we'll allocate the remainder of the time today toward those questions being addressed. So over to you, Dr. Bolhari.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and your interest in my talk. Can you hear me okay? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yes, all good.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. All right. So today's talk that I'm going to share with you is the project that's funded by the NSF, and it's a work in progress, as we started this project last fall as a pilot so that we're ready for the fall of 2023. So we are at this preliminary stage of figuring out really where we are, what we need to collect, what data is useful, what is not useful, and calibrating our tools. So those are all efforts that we've done in the previous year up to the summer of 2023. And I would love to have your feedback, input, any suggestions you might have. So as mentioned, I'm part of the environmental engineering program at Boulder, and being also part of the curriculum design and working with undergraduates, I also put together the environmental engineering fair each year, which means inviting a bunch of companies to come interview, talk with our students. And we're a small program of about 250 students. So it's such an intimate event, and working more and more towards what industry or graduate school wants from our graduates, it made us think of, okay, what are the skills that our students are lacking, what needs to be worked on. So we got excited about innovation self-efficacy when we look at what the market wants from the students that are graduating, and all of a sudden we see that there is a gap in confidence level of our students in environmental engineering compared to other students at Boulder, such as mechanical, aerospace, electrical, computer science, and so on. So we started thinking about how can we boost or explore where are we compared to other disciplines. So Dr. Bielfeld, my co-PI at the NSF grant, is the director of the integrated design engineering, and starting with pretty much the basic of what is innovation self-efficacy. So innovation, the way that I'll be using the term, is the intentional introduction of new and useful ideas, processes, products, or services. And the way that I use term self-efficacy, it's pretty much coming from the Bandura's theory of self-efficacy, which is defined as one's belief in their capacity to execute behaviors that are necessary to produce specific performance attainments. And why do we really care about environmental engineering and innovation self-efficacy? Because we had new challenges. When COVID hit, all of a sudden, there were lots of eyes focusing on environmental engineers. How do we deal with clean air that we're breathing in the airplanes? Is it safe, not safe? The indoor, how many people should be in a room talking, and so on. How about the water that I'm drinking? How about, the wastewater from people that had COVID? How do we make sure that it's clean, and so on? So these are all really new questions that we didn't historically teach our students to include them. And all of a sudden you have to think about new processes, new elements in your calculations. And of course, there were other new challenges for us, the chemicals called PFAS, which are non-stick forever chemicals that are in paint, food, shampoo, clothes that you put on, that all of a sudden we have to eliminate. So these new challenges required new confidence in our students to tackle, because historically, as I said, research shows that environmental engineering students compared to mechanical engineers, they feel like that they don't develop products, so they're not innovative or they're not creative, or creativeness is associated with building robots or, spaceship and things like that. So our research questions at this point started to be 2 with a pilot that we did last year. Do engineering students who self-identify as neurodiverse have different innovation self-efficacy, innovation interests, or innovative work compared to students that do not identify as being neurodiverse? And the second question was, do these innovative attitudes differ at the end of the semester if you engage the students in one activity that has shown to improve the innovative attitude of the students? So the theoretical framework that we utilized was the innovation self-efficacy scale of ISE, and I also have included the original work that was proposed by Sharf's team at Stanford. So it consists of 5 elements: questioning, asking lots of questions, making great observations, ideas from observing the world, experimentation as a way to understand how things work, idea networking, meaning being able to build a network of contacts that you reach out to get new ideas or products or create new products or services. And the last one is associational thinking, meaning that having the skill to connect concepts and ideas that initially when you look at them, they don't feel like that they belong or they're connected. So this is pretty much the framework that we'll be using to assess the students' innovation self-efficacy. So the method that we applied that framework was through a semester-long intervention in a few classes. So the one that I'm sharing with you is only water chemistry course, environmental engineering curriculum, which is the junior, senior level. So at the beginning of the semester, we participated, we asked the students to participate in this research. We had the pre-survey, then we started the curricular intervention. At the end, we also had a post-survey. The students presented their projects that they worked on in teams of 4 to 6 students, and that was the end of the semester. So throughout the curriculum intervention, we hooked up teams with mentors, STEM mentors, and also design mentors to assist them through the design process. So the curricular intervention, what did it look like? So this was an intervention that we had also done in another year, and it had proved to boost students' innovation self-efficacy, and the paper is published. If you're interested, please shoot me an email and I will be more than happy to share that with you. So pretty much we're asking the teams to design a K-12 STEM activity, whatever they like that activity to be, that's okay, but it needs to be tied down to the concepts that they're learning in the classroom, which specifically for this class, it was water chemistry. We also did it for another class, which was contaminants, fate, and transport. We insisted this year that they must meet up with their design mentor and also with a K-12 STEM teacher, because they're designing a K-12 activity, so they must meet with a STEM teacher to make sure that the vocabulary, the verbiage, and so on, the content is appropriate to the grade level that they're designing the curriculum for. And we also asked them to consider a global design, meaning that the activity that they're designing needs to meet some educational standards. And that's oftentimes what engineers are supposed to do, look at the standards, and that's how you're designing your system. And it could have meant that it could meet common state standards, NGSS, STL, ITA. And eventually they had to make sure that the product that they're designing is matching the Teach Engineering website's digital library, because we would like them to make their design to have a global audience. And I'm not sure from the participants if anybody's familiar with Teach Engineering, but I will share a slide with you next to go more into the detail of that website. So in the end, they were supposed to present their idea and the curriculum that they designed for class. They went through a judging process. They had to sell their idea, and then the teams had to vote for them for best projects. So the Teach Engineering website is a website that's funded by the NSF, and it hosts curriculum for K-12. So you can go to the website, and based on the level that you're interested in and the topics, you can browse curriculum. So this is an essential element when you talk with teachers, a great resource that usually K-12 STEM teachers utilize for finding appropriate curriculum for their classes. And we ask the students to target the framework for this design. And the reason for that was that Teach Engineering is a standards aligned free access curricular source, and it has emphasized real world engineering design and principles. And the focus is at K-12, considering standards, and it has more than 1,800 lessons. It's hands-on, it's fun. More than 40 NSF-funded projects have contributed to production of the curriculum, and it has usually more than 3 million users a year. So what was special about the pilot that we did last year was that we were able to hire design mentors on the left from an Idea Forge lab that we have, which is a creative lab with all the equipment, material necessary for the students to just go explore their designs. And also we hired a STEM teacher to sit down with the teams, meet with them on bi-weekly basis, answer any questions, modify the language, and help the students with looking up what standard really needs to be applied. So I just want to show you a few of the projects that the students designed, how they linked the concept to the idea that was taught in class. For instance, we talk about in water chemistry, chromatography, and this was, for instance, an example of an experiment that was designed to filter out chemicals in simple ways and to see what the ingredients of the cocktail of a mixture are based on the characteristics of the chromatography. Or phytoremediation in environmental engineering is utilizing plants to clean up contaminated liquids and water. Well, we've had, projects of just stick a flower in different colors and it gets different dyes and so on. But environmental engineering, we have to tune a specific plant for specific contaminants. We do this matching. For instance, specific cacti is really great for a specific metal to be remediated from the environment. And how are the students designing that, taking that concept to take it into the classroom at a fourth grade? Or for instance, we talk about carbonated systems and how it lowers or boosts up alkalinity in water. And the students are designing a fun Physichuck art project that's incorporating carbonated systems. Or people, we just like to do tie-dye t-shirts, but can you use the same concept, work with chemistry to create different colors and patterns? So pretty much, if I work around with pH and in different ranges of chemicals, can I modify the pattern and the colors that I get in the t-shirt? So these are just examples of the type of products that were the output of this intervention in the end. And before having this intervention, these courses were just blank lecture of going to class, sit down, this is what we're learning today, calculations, and that's it. So now we have elements of fun, thinking outside of the box, talking with some people, designing something, relating a simple concept to pretty much taking it into designing an artifact for different range of audience. So I'd like to share here the assessment tool that we utilized. So the assessment tool consisted of 3 different constructs. The innovation self-efficacy, which had 5 items, as simple as think about how confident you are in your ability to do these activities. For instance, generate new ideas, experimentation, and so on. So the response scale was 1 to 6. I feel extremely confident, or I don't feel confident at all. And innovation interest consisted of 4 items. How much interest do you have in experimentation in order to find new ideas? Rate yourself. And innovative work consisted of 6 different items. How important is it for you to be involved in the following jobs or activities, and so on. And detailed explanation of the tools are also available in our paper in 2022, and also Shar's paper. So the results that we got from this preliminary study, I'm sharing the characteristics of the participants that we had in this one specific class. So the class had enrollments of 63 students. And you see the left, the column in the middle, or the pre and then the post. So 47 students participated in the pre and 40 students participated in the post survey. So we had a good about more than 60% response rate. And here's where we asked the question of, do you identify as being neurodiverse? And you see that the response was 13% said yes, 19% said maybe, and 68% said no. In the post, we had 17.5% and 20%. So this was the part that pretty much shook us to see that the numbers are a lot higher than what we usually see in the literature. And are we really addressing that, at least at my institution, or at least at my program? Too large of a number to ignore. And we also looked at gender, how they're different with different genders. And we also asked questions about race, but there were categories that were not picked by the students. So I'm not including them here. Again, if you're interested in more detail level of the data, I can share the paper with you. So as I said, we didn't know what we're dealing with in our class. So this was enough for us to lead us to explore the results more. So what we did was that pre-survey and post-survey, we looked at different elements such as self-efficacy, innovation interest, career goals, selling the product or service in marketplace, giving an elevator pitch, experimentation in order to observe the world or find new ideas. And as you see, the students that said yes identify as being neurodiverse, maybe, and no in the pre-post. So when you look at the data initially, you see that there was no statistically significant difference across the 3 innovation constructs that we have in the literature, comparing the neurodiverse groups that self-identify. And it appears that ISE, though innovation self-efficacy, to be higher in the students post-survey that identify as being neurodiverse or maybe. So the comparison was a little bit higher at yes and maybes. But again, we're dealing with a small class, small n, so we can't really go any further. So that was a limitation of our pilot. But as I said, it's a work in progress research. And as a result, we're modifying the questions, we're polishing how better ask our questions for focus groups and more implementations, and we're including more activities, such as we're having a reflective essay focus groups after the class is finished, and also technical memos. So bottom line, there were no, statistically significant differences, but there were higher innovation self-efficacy in post surveys with the students that did identify as neurodiverse. So that was our quantitative observation. But we also had qualitative observations that the instructor of the course made, and also the mentors. And we realized that there were teams that had higher innovative products compared to teams that didn't have students that were neurodiverse. So, and that was only based on the comments that some of the students felt safe enough to share that we are neurodiverse with the instructor. So it wasn't something that we would say, because we didn't pair the data in the pilot study and the students didn't identify themselves. So if there were a couple of students that did identify and they just disclosed it, those were the ones that could be linked. But in the next years, in this fall study, we're gonna have paired data so that we can have more conclusive results of the pre and post, and we're matching, and we're able to also see how different team dynamics work in diverse teams, and also focusing on asking the questions post experiment in focus groups. So my research lens has always been community cultural wealth, looking into assets that the students bring into classroom. So we will be also incorporating this year the assets that the students bring, such as social, their familial, resistance, linguistic, and navigational capitals to the classroom. And I highly believe that those are personal assets that the students that identify being neurodiverse bring as an asset to teams. And it's not just all about the engineering skills. And we also felt like that there was a need for us to improve the assessment tool specifically for environmental engineering. So that's also another task that we'll be working on. And designing the artifacts, performing an artifact analysis, because there were input from neurodiverse individuals that made us believe that it's not just about innovation self-efficacy, which is an insight information that I share with the researcher, but it's also about the product that I design. Let's also evaluate those products' innovativeness level through another scale that we're utilizing to assess if that has a relationship between the innovation self-efficacy. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm open to any questions you might have, thoughts, ideas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bolhari. That was really interesting, and you know, especially looking at it from the standpoint of folks who are not quite in college yet, but you know, based on these experiences, perhaps they may have very fruitful experiences pursuing engineering. So there's already some questions in the chat, so we'll go through those first, and certainly if folks want to contribute additional questions that come to mind. But we'll start off with Annette, who asks, what was the level of awareness students had about neurodiversity when they indicated whether they were or were not, or could maybe? Annette has found that students have very little awareness of gender differences and how autism may appear, for example. So what are your thoughts in regards to that question?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So as I said, this was our initial round. So we tried to keep the question quite simple in our survey. And we kept it an open-ended question of, do you identify, and giving examples of, for instance, ADHD, autism spectrum, OCD, anxiety. And so we gave examples, but we didn't ask the students in our survey to dive into the details or to tell us which group they feel like that they belong to. But in several sessions that I do have throughout the fall semester. One just is a very brief session about the awareness. So as I said, we organize this career fair that happens in February semester, and I always share with my students through mass emails and lectures. I just go to different classes that, hey, this event is happening and make sure that you look into it, check it out. And we've had lots of discussion about how neurodiversity is a strength, different way of thinking. And there are companies that now are targeting students that identify. So I think we had enough talks about it for them to do some research and be aware of it. But as I said, we're expanding our survey to dive into the details, as I think we have a lot more, and we want to know more exactly about where did they learn about their neurodiversity. Was it diagnosed? Why do you think that you belong, and so on?
Thank you for that. Looks like another question was in regards to the instructor themselves. Did they identify as neurodivergent?
So this is complicated. So they didn't, but there was a close relationship in the family that was. So so that was also another so it was the gray zone. Maybe it was the maybe area. But there was also another researcher, senior researcher in the team that openly, yes, identified as being. And also the research assistants on this project that were hired are also neurodiverse. So intentionally in the yes and maybe.
Great, thank you for that context. Other questions from folks? I'll ask one as we perhaps wait for others to chime in. I'm kind of curious as far as how some of these experiences as part of the intervention, the mentorship, the hands-on experience, the activities, how you envision these could translate to a college context. So perhaps students who are a bit further along in their understandings of some of these topics related to engineering. What might that look like in a slightly older sample, do you think?
So I specifically worked with many of our undergrads. I do not work much on the grad program, but we've taken these numbers, started having talks with the chair and the dean, and different support systems that we also have at the college, such as tutoring, and also we have a pro-ready program that prepares the students that as they're graduating for different jobs, how to do interviews and so on, and sharing the results of, hey, look, these are the areas that we think that our neurodiverse students are or might be different, and how are you approaching them when you're teaching about different ways of having an interview with different companies and elevator pitches, and then putting a resume together and follow-ups, or asking for tutoring help when you're not really thinking about the needs in more detail, or what works or what doesn't work. So I would say that at least at the engineering program at Boulder, we're at the very beginning stage of making the case. So we're gathering our allies. I can't say today that we're confident that we have heard many yeses, but it's come across as being, wow, I hadn't thought about that. So we're at that stage of very interesting, I didn't know.
Okay, good deal. Lee poses the question, in general, are engineers known for having an especially high degree of self-efficacy in comparison to the general population? Just trying to get a sense of the bigger picture there.
That's a wonderful question. So I don't have the data comparing engineers with the general public, but in the different engineering categories, definitely environmental engineers have the lower self-confidence in innovation self-efficacy. Because as I said, we more design processes, not more innovative products. So as a result, the literature shows that the engineering students, environmental engineering students, self-efficacy, innovation self-efficacy is lower compared to mechanical, aerospace, and electrical engineering students.
That's definitely interesting. I'm just taking a few notes here. And that contributes, not to directly answer this, but I just read an article this week that said engineering professors are more likely to value creativity and relate it to intelligence than other majors. Well, and we very well may get another question or two or comment, but you're talking, Dr. Bolhari, about some of the steps that you all are taking for this next iteration of the study, of this line of inquiry. I'm not sure if this is within scope, but is it longitudinal? Are you engaging with the same students, or is it another set?
So that's an interesting question, because we did it longitudinal in the last 2 years. So we have the data from those, and that was published. But with this new class coming in, we will be taking it on for also another cycle. So we're not gonna study the same group that we did in the fall semester of last year, because we didn't have all of this in place.
Gotcha.
And our grant arrived mid-fall of last year. So
yeah, that definitely has sort of implications. Lee asks a follow-up. In engineering, is creativity equivalent to intelligence? But what would be the I guess parallel for business creativity? If hopefully I'm capturing that rightly.
So was that a question for me?
Yes.
Because I have something to share about that. So when we got, so our research has been on self-efficacy, meaning I rate myself. So that's the social question under investigation is me, but we're also in the phase of analyzing the product, which is outside element that you like to investigate, and that's what we label as innovativeness. So there is another research team, our collaborators at University of Ohio, that they're studying it, and they have their own scale of analyzing a product for its creativity and innovativeness. And I'm realizing more and more, and they are from business school. So more and more that we work together, I'm realizing that the way that they describe creativity and innovativeness is different from engineering. And there needs to be a little bit of exchange of vocabulary or more to understand what these two mean, but I don't know really if they are the same or different at this point. But that is absolutely one of the main disagreements that we have, or we have to figure out really what engineers in business school, how are we really putting these, because engineering, because business schools dealing more with entrepreneurship and creativity. So those are the two terms that they use a lot. But I think on our side, it's more about innovative ideas.
Seems like that's always the challenge in terms of operationalizing certain terms that may have confounding elements across different spaces. Good opportunity to try to make more concrete. Any other questions from the group, and/or do you have any additional reflections that you'd like to share with the group, Dr. Bolhari?
I
So
just have
I'd
a,
like to, yes.
sorry, I just have a clarifying question. I would have turned my microphone on before, but my dog was loudly barking. So can you, Dr. Bolhari, can you just remind me, the question that you asked, was it how confident do you feel in addressing this or tackling this problem? Was it something along those lines?
Yes, so it's a standard scale that we use, and the questions in that questionnaire are in terms of how confident are you.
Right. So you
So
didn't
that's how the questions start.
you didn't ask any questions about, like, do you think you're creative?
No, so
Yeah.
we specifically are just sticking to this well-established assessment tool, which is asking questions of, think about how confident you are in, or how much interest do you have in, or how important is it to you to be involved in. So those are wonderful questions that we intend that to ask in focus groups after the intervention's done. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was cool because I've been reading that sometimes when we outright ask people, are you creative or do you think you're innovative, what we're actually measuring, like it's better to ask how confident do you think you are in tackling this problem. So exactly the way that you did it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and it's interesting that we did it with another cohort last year and we published that paper too. Their gain in innovation self-efficacy was a lot higher compared to this year. But it was interesting that to observe that the cohort that we had last year, they just came with higher innovation self-efficacy compared to previous year. And it could be because of COVID, because we didn't have any labs. People were just Zooming, they didn't have that, but they've had some chances to come in. So we're exploring the differences to see really, when you ask people that question, how confident are you? Do you have other ways to assess their response? For instance, we're comparing the products that were designed 2 years ago compared to last year, because obviously there was a huge development in innovativeness of the products that were designed last year. Although the students rated themselves as not having much gain, but their designs just communicated to be a lot more innovative. So I think that's a wonderful point, that sometimes you don't feel like you're confident, but it's just because your confidence is really high and you're at this level that you've just built the muscles and you're just acing it and you don't realize it. So
Yeah. And it could be situational, right? So self-efficacy, confidence in the actual task. I might have low self-confidence in being innovative in this task, but in general, I think of myself as a very innovative person.
exactly. And that's why the assessment tool helps us, because it's studied, because it was validated with so many engineering programs across the country, and they are exploring specific items. And I think if we go with those specific questions, there's a better chance of us getting a response within that scale that communicates the gain, rather than asking the open question is, do you think you're a creative person? And then you're like, yes, I do lots of arts and crafts. I think I'm very creative. So I think that's one point. And another point that I wanted to share was that we published this paper and also shared our work at the ASWE conference this year. And it was amazing to hear so much feedback from the engineering professors, graduate students that approached us saying how they feel the need in this topic to be talked about more, of neurodiversity in undergrads and also with the professors, and the gap of not being able to talk about it, or having to really have that extra burden of not knowing where you belong. So it was wonderful to hear lots of encouragement and great input. So we're definitely motivated to continue the work this coming year. And at Boulder, this is our first year that we're recruiting PhD programs. So if you know that there are any of your students, graduate students that are interested in pursuing higher level or depth in the pretty much neurodiversity, I encourage you to maybe, I'm not sure if I can do that here now. But please ask them to take a look at it. We're gonna have the first cohort this fall. So I think that's the last thing I'd like to share.
Wonderful. We appreciate your time and sharing details about this inquiry, Dr. Bolhari. And we're glad that so many of you could join us today for Canvas. And we invite you to come back on Friday, August 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, when we're going to have Dr. Carolyn O'Loughlin, who recently graduated, discuss their dissertation work on the experiences of autistic college students and what have led to their persistence in college. So we'll look forward to that in August. In the meantime, we'll look forward to hearing any resources or studies or items that you all want to share via the Canvas community, via our listserv. This video recording will become available shortly next week. So you can look forward to that soon, and we'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a good weekend ahead. Thank you.